Sonia.
So thank you so much for everyone's showing up. We have a lot of really interesting thinkers on this call, so it's lovely. Hi, Sonia. We can't see you, but we know you're on chat. What I'd love for you to do, just to help facilitate everybody's connection, there you go, Sonia, is to put your name and your email connection in the chat, just so we have a kind of a more shared or collective framework for connecting with each other after the call. And we have a really fun session today with Santi. And I might screw up the name of your country. Bosque. Viva Bosque, is that
Yeah,
right?
Viabosque.
Via
Viabosque.
Bosque.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And but I want to do a little catch up from our last call in January. So in January, we decided that we would open up the kind of the curating of the content of the calls. And I will still kind of hold the space of doing the invites. We have today scheduled, I have May scheduled with Marty Singelman. I think about a year ago, January maybe, shared her insights on how she is teaching consciousness to people individually and collectively, and she shared that work. She's coming back for for us to catch up on her own evolution and how her thinking about consciousness and her business model is to work with people over the course of 4 years to deepen their own journey into consciousness. So it's always um, interesting to see where our journeys take us, and I think her journey will be fascinating. So she's coming on May 20th, and then Daniel is going to share kind of a state of sustainability um, comment in June on the third Tuesday in June. And it's a moving target, so it'll be interesting to see where we are in June as opposed to in April or January. So that's where we are today. And I'm just really excited to hear what Santi's going to share with us today. We kind of connected um, organically through he had run into my book and decided that his work and what I was thinking had some synergies attached to it. And I always, these days, I pay attention to synergies when they show up. I recently spent a week at the Heifer International Ranch in Arkansas, Perryville, Arkansas, where they've been engaged in regenerative agriculture and ranching for about a decade or more. And in that visit, one of the things I noticed is that a lot of their regenerative agriculture work and ranching work was really about spotting synergies and then amplifying them and putting them into the ranching strategy. Dale, you would have loved it, I think. Anyway, so that said, Santi and I discovered synergies, and I'm really happy to have him come and share. Um, and I'm just going to hand it over to you, and we can move from here.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Nice to see everyone, and thanks for having
We've lost sound, right? Have we lost sound? Wait a minute. I just want to.
me now. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, I screwed up on my end. Sorry.
I'm not going to repeat all the beautiful things I just said, but no, I'm Santiago Bunce. I go by Santi. Kathy, thank you so much for having me. Everyone on the call, thanks for joining and for having me, and Marianne and Daniel. As Kathy noted, yeah, we met a couple of years ago because I read a book and I was like, oh my gosh, there's more people who think about cool things. And I wanted to reach out and then, got introduced to these calls. And so I'm grateful to be here today. I'm gonna talk about how to maintain momentum amidst change today, and we'll have some opportunities to have conversations. But I want to kick us off with a little icebreaker, mostly for my benefit because I want to know who you are, and I want to know what you care about, and that'll make sense here in a second. But I'd love for you to share your name, the organization you're affiliated with, where you are in the world today, and then I would love for you to share what we call a low stake hot take. So this is something that you care really deeply about, but it doesn't really matter. So you might also call this like a pet peeve. I'll share mine. So I'm Santiago Bunce. I go by Santi. At my company is Viabosque. I'm an executive coach and facilitator and network analyst. And I'm currently in Orlando, Florida. And my low stake hot take, this really isn't to cause offense, it's just a fun game. Low stake hot take is that I don't think that chapstick or like lip balm should be a thing. I think it creates like a dependence. I also live in Florida. It's very humid here. We don't need it. But my low stake hot take is I think, you know, the chapstick world is is a bit of a racket. And we'll just pass it to the next person. Mary Ellen, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I am Mary Ellen Lynch. I am in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And my affiliation is with Coastal Carolina University as a PhD student. And my low stick, hot stick, is that right?
Low stake hot take. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is drinking water out of plastic bottles and watching people walking around. And I don't know, in the middle of taking communion, they're going to have a drink. Just
Too much. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Mary Ellen. Can you pass it off to someone?
thanks. So Frank.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Frank indeed. I'm living in the Netherlands. I have my own company, Oidels Leadership. I'm an executive coach and team coach. And I have to say, low stake, hot take, the concept that has not resonated with me. That's probably my English. So maybe something you can try it one more time to explain.
It would be something that you feel rather passionate about, but that really doesn't have a bearing or importance in the greater world. I'll give you another one.
I
Another
can do
example.
the Formula One. Yeah, it's terrible, of course, but still, like some people to win. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Frank. Can you pass it off to someone?
Yeah, Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Haskell. I am in Seattle, and I that communion one was awesome. But the chapstick one I feel really passionate about because I wish I invented it. And whenever I leave Seattle, I find I'm addicted to it because of the moisture content here, and I can't walk 2 steps without using it.
Right.
So I find it necessary, so I will fight you on it. Ruth.
Right. So sorry, I'm eating my dinner because I got the time completely wrong. I saw GMT, but not, it's British summertime that we're in. So now having my dinner. So I'm in Scotland. I'm in a house it's a property that we've bought with my husband that we've got to renovate. Hence, we've got silver on the walls and stuff like that. Just if you're wondering. And I'm moving from psychotherapeutic counselling into depth leadership coaching. So I'm just coming to the end of some coaching training and then hoping to leap into leadership coaching, but working at depth. So basically for people to become self-led, and then when they've got a harmonious inner system, that will be reflected externally, because the law of life is that the external is a reflection of the internal. So that's hopefully where I'm heading. And in terms of the hot stick, no, the low stick hot take, I'm like panicking here, like, what is it? I'm sure I've got lots, but I'll just share that I actually am completely addicted to lip balms and have been for years, probably since a teenager. So that probably is my low stick hot take, because I am addicted to it. So anyway, lovely to meet you all. I'm sorry, I'm going to put the video off again because you don't want to see me eating. It's been weird.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you pass it off to
Thanks.
someone?
Oh yes. Who hasn't been? Sorry, Sonia.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Ruth. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Merrill, and I'm calling in from, oh yeah, my audio is on, from northern Minnesota. And it's interesting, there's a lot of coaches on this screen. I'm joining that group. I just became certified, and I call myself a professional coach, especially a transition coach. And my low stakes hot take, I was trying to find something that's totally inconsequential, and I can't. I feel like it all matters. So I was going to talk about garbage and plastic bags and all this stuff that I see on the highways out here. But you know what I think we should do? Because I'm so opposed to plastic bags in supermarkets, I really think we should charge a lot of money for them. That's my low stakes hot take.
Good, good. Maybe at least medium steak, but yes, good. Thanks, Sonia. Excellent. Thanks. Can you pass it off to someone?
Yes, I can. How about Daniel?
Thank you, Sonia. My name is Daniel Lossie. I'm the principal and chief century thinker is my fun title at Viabosque Group. We are a climate consulting agency. We work with large, complex organizations to help them navigate their climate impacts, identify them, and find a way to improve them and become more resilient and adaptive. I love what we do. I'm calling in from Omaha, Nebraska, the middle of the United States, not far from Dale. I mean, I know you're more central Nebraska, or are you further west? And my hot take low stake is when people put things in front of doors, whether it's a closet door or a cupboard door. We have a smaller house, so there's not a lot of storage, and the closets and things that have doors are pretty small. So sometimes there's a piece of furniture in front of a door, so I can't open it all the way until I move the thing out of the way. So that's definitely a low stake hot take, creating friction where there shouldn't be. Don't get me worked up about this.
That's wonderful.
I will pass it on to Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca. I'm calling in from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And I am part of an organization that works in a bunch of different ways, doing community building and outreach to people who are without access to resources. And I'd say I think I can't think of any other low stakes hot takes except the lip balm thing, because in Canada it is entirely necessary. I can't. It's either too dry or it's like too cold, and so that's it. I'm just stuck on lip tap. So thanks for that one. I'm forever going to be passionate about it now.
Thanks, Rebecca. Can you share? Can you pass it off? We got Mark, Dale, Kathy, and Marianne, I think.
How about Marianne?
Hey there. Hi, guys. Marianne Hennon. I live in Shoreview, Minnesota, which is I'm in my home office, which is a suburb of around St. Paul, Minnesota, Twin Cities area. And I am retired about 4 years ago, and in my retirement, I've gotten very active, involved, and on board with equine assisted mental health therapy and learning. So that's been a passion all along, but I'm working on that more or less. My pet peeve, I'll say, is watching the news or watching, let's just go with the news. Old people watch the news instead of listen to it on their body. But no, and seeing misspelled words and using spell check, and just glossing right over it. It's like there's just no excuse.
Like
these
on the
days.
run on the bottom, it's
Yeah,
got
and
like
the
a
running
misspell word,
thing,
yeah.
and there's my mom used to be a proofreader. I'm a pretty good speller, and it just bugs me. So there. On that note, I'll pass it off
screen
to
for like
what?
8 seconds. Or like maybe they think it'll only be on screen for 8 seconds. So
Yeah.
it'll slide by.
Yeah, but just somebody has been too lazy, in my opinion, to
Yeah.
just double check. All right, I'll pass it off to Kathy.
Well, so I'm Kathy Allen. I am calling in from my home office in St. Cloud, Minnesota, about 80 miles northwest of the Twin Cities. I live along the Mississippi River up here, which is about a third of a mile long, wide at this point. The headwaters is about 200 miles north of us. Anyway, so I don't know if this is a low stake hot take, but it is something that irritates me quite a bit, which is when perpetrators call themselves victims. It just irritates the heck out of me. So I'm going to pass it on to Dale.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, Dale Doolan here in Southwest Nebraska, little town of 8,000 people called McCook. I'm a retired farmer rancher, but a lot of my work the last few years has been volunteering to do community development work, and both locally, and then I was on the Nebraska Community Foundation Board. I'm a past chair. So I'm sort of retired from these leadership positions, but very active, continuing to help rural communities develop. My challenge, I guess, I don't know if this is low stakes or whatever, but it is like toward Kathy's a little bit that the challenge of helping people appreciate the abundance they have around them. And in rural communities, oftentimes there's a scarcity mindset. I think that's probably not exclusive to rural communities, but helping people understand that there's abundance and appreciate it and change that attitude. And that's important for us, because once we get that switched, it is amazing what we can do.
Thanks, Dale. Can you pass it to Mark? We'll go with Mark. Mark, you're remaining, yes?
Oops, sorry. Yeah, my name's Mark Hemans. I live in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. I'm almost totally retired, but want to sort of keep one finger in the non-retirement. And like Dale, part of that is I hope that I can be helpful, if not work through volunteer activities. I'm going to go back to something that I think is pretty low stakes. Some of the most recent things you mentioned are pretty important, but mine is, why do people not wring out washcloths and sponges after they use them sufficiently? So they're sustainable. I'm going to put that in. I don't know who's left.
I think you're the last one.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful. Yes, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one. That's going to make it into the rotation, I think. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And I share that just because it's a fun way to kind of connect. And again, I wanted to know all of you. I'm sharing my screen. You tell me if you can see it. Yes. Okay. So again, I'm Santi. My company is Viabosque. I'll just share really briefly a little bit about our approach, because it'll inform our conversation today. But we are a coaching, consulting, and analyst organization working mostly with nonprofits, but we work with some for-profits, and we're trying to help teams and coalitions create ecosystems for sustainable performance. And what that really means is building the relationships and building the connections, and supplying with the tools and frameworks that will allow them to be as effective in a sustainable way. We look at that from the lens of performance, emergence, and ecosystems. And I've been an executive coach for about 10 years. I've been a facilitator for about 20, and a network analyst for about 8. And have done a lot of work in the affordable housing space, do some work in the renewable energy space, do a lot of work in the progressive tax movement now, and community and economic development. And I've been fortunate enough to do the work both in English and Spanish here in the US and abroad. I'll touch really quickly here on this idea of performance, emergence, and ecosystems, because it's going to inform our conversation today. Viabosque, if you know Spanish or maybe a Romance language, translates into the way of the forest. And so many years ago, I got inspired by biomimicry. And while I wouldn't name Viabosque as a biomimetic organization, we are inspired, and we are inspired by nature, and we use nature as a reference point. So we look at performance, which is really how do teams work together? How do we set goals? How do we deliver on strategy? How do we make things happen? And I think this would kind of be the bucket that orients towards maybe the traditional or like seasoned approaches to leadership, about managing
Hey,
teams,
Santi,
managing. Yeah.
Santi, can I just interrupt you? We can see like your whole presentation, your
You can see the whole
notes, and
presentation. Let
you
me
should put
see
it
here.
on like what is it called? Presentation view, maybe? Do you know what I mean? We can see all your notes out on the side and the next slide and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is that true for
Let's
everybody?
see.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Thank you very
presenter mode
much.
or whatever.
Let me see. Display settings. So presenter side view. How about there? Can you see? Is that better?
You have to share it now again.
Oh, also important. Thanks for letting me know. That's good. I would have gone the whole way. All right. You still, what do you see now? Do you still see the notes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So go
And how
back
about,
where you to display
yeah, how about
settings.
this one?
Do you have two monitors?
There
Oh,
you
there
go.
we go.
Yeah,
There you go.
I do have two monitors. Yes. Okay,
Okay,
great. Thank you very much. Okay, so
sure.
when we talk about performance, we're talking about again like the traditional approach with leadership, and there we often look at like fauna as examples. And so one example we use frequently is like the beaver. So beavers, they build dams, but they also have their own form of metrics. They're listening for how loud the water is. They are feeling for how quickly it's moving, and that's helping determine like when the dam is done. When we talk about emergence, we talk about creating the space for innovation, the space for agency, and really, it's the kind of unseen activity underground that, or just invisible activity, maybe cultural activity that then creates the conditions for an idea to spark or for us to take advantage of an opportunity in the moment. So there we look at like fungi, and just mushrooms and how there's days and weeks of activity underground with the mycelium, and then they pop up. And then the final piece is the ecosystems. And the ecosystem is really how performance and emergence interact, but also how teams exist within their boundaries, like within their teams and beyond their teams. And we look, and you probably saw in the notes, we'll actually map this out. Like, what does the ecosystem of an organization or a coalition look like? And Christine, I think you put in the chat, like making the invisible visible. That's what we try and do also with teams when we look at the ecosystem approach. So today, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about an animal in particular as it relates to this idea of maintaining momentum through change. So you may be familiar with the framing of VUCA, right? Which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We're experiencing that all the time. We're experiencing it today. We're experiencing it in organizations at all times also. And there's always something going on. And volatility refers to the rate and unpredictability of change. Uncertainty refers to the lack of clarity. Complexity refers to the fact that there's multiple pieces, and ambiguity refers to just like the haziness of reality, and the moment. And we can actually map, like how much we know about the current situation and how much we can predict about the results of our actions, and actually kind of make sense. Like, is this a moment of volatility? Is this a moment of complexity? And the flip of those is then how do we take action to create stability, predictability, simplicity, and clarity, which I would name as the flip side of that, of the VUCA coin. But when VUCA occurs, we're trying to understand and we're trying to make sense of things so that we can respond to it. If there's a lot of volatility, we're trying to create slack, and that might be in terms of resources or people or time. If there's a question of complexity, we're maybe trying to compartmentalize and understand little pieces. If there's questions of uncertainty and ambiguity, we're perhaps trying to get a better sense of like what is really going on, and maybe we're testing things. But today's focus is not about trying to prevent change, because change is going to continue to happen, but it's about insulating ourselves from as much as possible from the effects and engaging with the effects of change as relevant. It's about trying to maintain momentum, knowing that things outside of our control are shifting. It's not to bury our head in the sand. It's not to, deny it as reality, but it's rather to how do we face it and engage despite it happening. And so my goal today is to share with you some tools or tips you can use individually, and then tools and tips you can use with your team. But for this, I want to give you the reference point of the coyote. And change is challenging. And from a neuroscience perspective, when change occurs, it is affecting and activating our limbic system. And our limbic system is the system one thinking. It's very fast thinking. If you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, or if you've read much about the psychology or neuroscience, we have part of the brain that reacts to pattern recognition, that reacts to the things we've always done. It reacts to the kind of the rules of the heuristics we've made based on past experience. And there's a part of our brain that can work more deliberately, more effortfully, more slowly in response to new challenges that we don't know the answer to. But our brain, is very plastic. There's a lot of plasticity in our brain. And so we have the ability to shift how we approach in these scenarios. Coyotes are a good reference to this. Coyotes can adapt to very unpredictable environments. So coyotes can shift from being nocturnal to diurnal based on what's going on around them. They can shift to finding food in more wooded areas to more urban areas. They can adjust their activity and their consumption based on the environment around them. Sometimes that is predictable because they live in the environment. Sometimes it is unpredictable because new factors are coming in. But what's important here is that they don't just passively respond to the change. They test and explore new approaches. The combination of flexibility and proactive experimentation that coyotes have allow them to thrive in new environments, and it's because they're testing things and trying to adapt in the moment. Coyotes are very North American, but also jackals in Europe and in Asia espouse similar activities. So here we're going to talk about the individual and the team approaches here. Individual is about personal resilience, and team is more about collaborative adaptation. And when we look at individual adaptation, that involves building personal practices that help create clarity, focus, and energy amid the change. And when we're talking about team adaptation, we're talking about collective practices that maintain coordination, alignment, and momentum when circumstances shift. These individual and team components will play in with each other, but there's stuff, again, you can do on your own, and there's stuff you can take back with your team, whether that's a formal team or an informal team. So they're complementary dimensions, and the strongest teams and the strongest leaders are trying to implement both of these. Let me stop here for a second before I get into the individual tools and see if there's any questions or thoughts or immediate reactions.
So I'm curious, Santi, resilient systems, I might be a third layer here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the structures that might allow this to be maintained over a period of time.
Yeah, so there's a kind of, this goes more to your ecosystem ideas, is that old growth forests are highly resilient, so there's a set of characteristics that go with resilience on an ecosystem level that could be a third circle in your two circles. Right.
Absolutely. Explore how to build that. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Any other immediate thoughts? And you'll get out, we'll send out these slides, and I also have like a worksheet on all this after. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the individual tools. So there's 5 main tools here. Intentional routines create islands of stability amid change. This is how we first start to insulate from the broad occurrences that are happening around us. So the first tool is this idea of purposeful routine. So we want to foster stability by establishing daily routines. To implement this, we want to identify 1 or 2 small routines that would provide value and stability in your workday. This could be like a 10-minute morning planning routine. It could be like a midday check-in on your priorities. It could be an end-of-day reflection. The key here to start implementing this is consistency. Like, start small and build gradually. But what you're doing is you at least know that the start of the day has 10 minutes where you get to prepare. The end of the day has 10 minutes for you to reflect. No matter what else happens in the day, the goal is for you to maintain that time as as sacred and protected so that you can build that practice. And ideally that practice is something that is of value, again, to the work that you're doing, right? The second tool is this idea of focus management or attention management. And this comes from trying to create boundaries and protecting your time and strategies to sustain concentration in the face of distractions. The big one here, and you've probably heard of this, is the idea of the Pomodoro technique, which is to work in 25-minute intervals and then take 5-minute breaks. You can give yourself like a little reward at the 5 minutes, but the goal is really 25 minutes. And so then there's things you can do to kind of signal that you are in your protected time or your focus time. Your phone and your computer obviously have the do not disturb mode, but there's other things you can do. You can put on like a particular song or a particular YouTube is really good about having like 25-minute classical music videos, right? So you can put that on. That's a signal not just for you, but the people around you. Like, oh, Santi's in his focus time. Let's not interrupt. So we're creating the boundaries. We're not being rude, right? But we're just kind of creating the boundaries. The one that I use is that I have a desk lamp on my desk. So I turn that on, and that for me is like both my signal and then, sometimes, I mean, my wife is always really good at it. Sometimes my kids pay attention to it. But it's signaling to those around you that you've got the focus here. And to do the Pomodoro technique, like in even a more effective way, is when the 25 minutes is up, if you've completed a task, just really quickly start the next task, because there's research that says we're more likely to complete the task more quickly if we come back to something that's already been started, as opposed to we come back from the break, we have to sit down and now we're like starting from zero. So instead of starting from zero, set yourself up for success in 5 minutes, the future self of 5 minutes from now, by starting the next task immediately. The third thing that we do is on an individual level is the language of wins. And here we talk about outcome, insight, capability, and process. Outcome wins are any win that you have that is related to like something specific or measurable, or like the end result. Process wins are all kind of the stepping stones or momentum steps or like checkpoints that you accomplish in service to a greater outcome win. And then insight wins are the things that you're learning. They're the aha moments, the new insight, the new understanding. And then capability is anytime you've developed a new skill or obtained a new tool or collaborated with new staffing or colleagues that allow you to do the work more effectively. The purpose of the win language is to be able to literally track down during the day. I had this win, I had this insight win, I got this capability win, I got this process win when I had a good conversation. I got somebody on the phone that I've been trying to get on the phone for 3 weeks, and that was a good process win because we finally got to chat. Just to kind of keep track and say, you know what, this has been a productive day. This has been about momentum, and I know all this other stuff is going on in the outside world, but I've been able to kind of manage this space here. The fourth tool is this idea of dynamic planning or adaptive planning, which is creating kind of 2-week plans with fixed or flexible classifications. So in the next 2 weeks, these are the things I have to do, and these are the things that are a little bit flexible and can shift as needed. If you have a supervisor or you're working with somebody closely, the ideal there is that you're also kind of coordinating those 2-week plans with those folks, right? That we have shared understanding of what's fixed and what's flexible. Because if we know that we have these fixed components and the flexible is where we can be a little bit more adaptive. The big thing about VUCA is that it's always happening. And you've probably experienced this maybe every day of your working career, but there's always something that comes up that you don't anticipate. Sometimes that something is very welcome and enjoyable and productive and helpful. And often that something is like a little fire you need to put out, or, an email that came in that you need to respond to. But the point is, it's always kind of taking stuff away. So if we're very clear at the start of our time, at the start of the 2 weeks, what's fixed and what's flexible, we can be better positioned to take something off our plate when it's needed. And then you update this plan every week. So it's kind of like a running 2-week plan. And then the last one, and then I'll stop here for a second, is this idea of deliberate pausing. which I could do because I speak a lot and quickly. But it's organized reflection prior to reacting to changes. So this comes from the idea, it actually comes from like a meditative practice, also an emotional intelligence, but it's we either experience or see a change happening. And the practice is to literally take 1 to 2 minutes before you audibly or actionably react to that change. Obviously we're not talking about something that puts someone in danger, but like the point is we're trying to understand what is most important to this, what is most important related to this change, and why does this change have the impact on me that I think it does. If we go back to the system one thinking in the limbic system, like that is our body trying to respond to change because there's a fear there and there's a protection there. And that's not a fault, that's a feature of our systems trying to protect ourselves. So here what we're trying to do is recognize, okay, change creates some sense of fear or stress. Let me just take a breath, try and understand what's going on and why this change is relevant for me. Maybe it's relevant because it influences the outcome of your work. Maybe it's relevant because it bruises your ego. Whatever the case may be, the more we can understand that, the better equipped we can be to respond to it. Any questions here? Thoughts on the 5? Any of these you've used?
I really appreciate the wins language and the way that you defined the 4 different ones, because so often I'm in rooms where wins are just outcomes and they glance over wins that are insights, capabilities, or processes. So that I feel like I'm going to add not every day, but sometimes my daily journal is a what were my wins today reflection, and this is going to give me a new language frame for that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Daniel. And to transition that, I love the language of wins because we take so much for granted with language sometimes about what people mean when they say certain things. And so if we can define the wins and the results of our efforts together, that could be really productive. And a way to kind of share this at a team perspective is like if you use Microsoft Teams or Slack, kind of like any of the shared communication platforms where you can have a channel. It's like we literally, we used to do this in person when folks were like in the office all the time. We'd have like a wall of wins and people put the sticky notes, right? Like these are the wins of the week. And maybe every kind of win was a different color, right? A sticky note. We do the same thing with Teams and Slack, right? You create a wins channel, the wall of wins, and people can just kind of be posting on there. And then, folks react to it and give kudos. And it builds momentum, especially when the work feels overwhelming or like it feels like it's inconsistent or changing. Yeah, great. Okay. We have a high fives channel. Oh, great, Daniel. Yeah, very cool. So like kudos and the good things that have been happening. Yes. Great. Great. Okay. So let's talk about team tools briefly. So we've got a couple team tools here. We've got, and again, I have a worksheet, and I'll be able to send this to you all, or at least Kathy, I can send it to you, and we can make sure everybody gets it. All right, but the first one is this idea of transparent communication protocols, and this is really about when you have a team creating structured updates during uncertainty. Transparent communication is incredibly important in moments of change, and it's one of the things that kind of like goes out the window first, unless there's been a design structure around it. To improve this, you want to establish clear channels for different types of information during change. So that might be, you might have like daily huddles or micro updates that are kind of just like, this is the bare bones of what we understand is happening today and the tasks. There's also, you could do like weekly assignment sessions. You can have like an information repository. The goal here is that folks know where the feedback loops are coming from and where to look for information. You want to create expectations about what information will be shared and by whom and through which channels. That also means being clear about, the fact that maybe not all information is going to be able to be shared. And that's totally fine, right? There's a balance here between creating extra angst in a team or a staff when it's not necessary, right? That the volatility creates enough angst as it is. So you don't always want to say, look, we may be laying people off, we may not. That doesn't really help very much, but you can share, like, look, we're working on how the organization is going to have to evolve, and the senior team's talking about it this week, and there's going to be a formal update to the staff on Monday. That's enough. That's transparent and clear and sets expectations about who is going to be discussing what and to what degree. The second one is this idea of milestone celebration. So it's recognizing the progress, regardless of what's happening outside. And we talk about this again with the wall of wins. But what we're looking here is what we would call for like milestone moments, or like again, I talked about stepping stones with the process win, but we're trying to see, look, we've got this big, task ahead of us. But in the last month, this is like the big win that has the big milestone that's put us in that position. I think I mentioned I do a lot of work in housing, especially affordable housing. Those are projects that, take a long time to secure the funding for, take a long time to develop, maybe a year and a half, 2-year timeline. But there's big milestones in there, right? There's key agreements being signed, there's groundbreaking, there's the first unit being built, right? There's all these kinds of milestones, and so just kind of recognizing that. It sounds straightforward, but it's often overlooked. And so if we can focus energy there, that can be really productive for the team as they're managing all these changes. The third is being clear on the decision-making frameworks and using these models for using them as models for choices and managing ambiguity. You may be familiar with some of these. This is like the RACI model, where you're looking at who's responsible, who has authority, who is consenting, and who is informing a decision. Right. So just being really clear, like what's in whose lane. If we're in a team, we're in a moment of volatility as a team. We know that the final decision maker on this is going to be Santi. We know that the final decision maker on the financial stuff is going to be Kathy. We know that the final decision maker on the culture stuff is going to be Daniel, whatever the case may be. But it's being really clear up front. You're kind of trying to leverage, Dale, I think you talked about abundance, right? You're trying to leverage the abundance that you have of time and like bandwidth in the moments of simplicity and clarity is when you want to be building all these things, because you're not going to be in a moment of time scarcity or resource scarcity or energy scarcity in the future. So the decision-making framework and really all these team tools are about how do we build things now so that when we need them later, they're going to work. And you've probably all heard the phrase, and I love using this one, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So your organizations might be experiencing a certain level of volatility today, but you can still build for this moment and for the future. The fourth tool, team tool, is this piece of collaborative prioritization. So team-based methods to realign when circumstances change. Here, if you remember like the 2-week tool that we had with the individuals, this is also about, everybody bringing their 2-week agenda and making sure there's alignment collaboratively across the group. So much of what's important on the team tools and maintaining momentum is clarity of expectations. Things are already moving fast. The last thing anybody wants to be doing is wasting their time on something that's not important or not as urgent. And so because the communication often gets dropped off, and because what ends up happening many times, not always, but many times in moments of volatility, is that we kind of have to focus in on what we know, which can create a siloing effect. So what we're talking about here is being really intentional about bringing folks back together so that they can we can make sure we're all aligned, and again, setting clear expectations. And then the final piece is about cross-training, which is really about building resilience through skill redundancy. You don't have to cross-train folks 100%, but at least identify what are the top 2 or 3 critical actions or relationships that each staff person has, each team member has. And then who could we on the team introduce to that relationship or skill up on that skill, so that if somebody steps away for whatever reason, either, I don't know, maybe it's a parental leave, right? Maybe it's a reduction in force, but we already know that at least the most critical pieces will be covered to some degree, and we don't have to necessarily start over from zero. But this also ties back again to the collaborative prioritization, right? Like being clear, what are the 3 key actions or relationships that I hold in this work? And it's not about ego. It's just like my role is designed to do this thing. These are the top 3 components of my role. Let's make sure other folks are aware of that. Let me pause here because I want to share just one more screen before we go into discussion. But any reactions or thoughts here to the team tools?
I think that there are some additional redundancies in really good teams. One is skill, one is knowledge, conceptual frameworks or specific knowledge around what you're trying to do together. But the third one, I think, is relational redundancy. You know, who holds key relationships in a team? And if that person's gone, who manages or holds the relationship if they're not there and they're not present for some reason?
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, how many times, I'm sure you've all worked with organizations like the chief executive, senior executive leaves, right? And outgo, X number of years of relationship. And then, and sometimes there's a shadowing or passing off, but it's never too early to strengthen those relationships.
Adding to that, I wonder about culture, cross-training culture. I mean, culture is supposed to be held by everybody, and there are certain people on teams who are a bit more of the culture holders, or they stoke the fire more than others. So is there cross-training in that piece?
Yeah, that's excellent, Daniel. And I showed the map really briefly, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with like social network analysis, but that's also like social network analysis either within an organization or amongst organizations. It's trying to figure out like who holds those key relationships and who holds that key capital, right? Again, without ego, right? But like who holds that key capital, and then how could it be shared? You'll have folks on the periphery. Is that because the structure's been designed so that they are peripheral, or is that because of their choice? And then what could we do as conveners or curators or weavers to reconnect folks so that it's a more decentralized entity? Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. One more slide for you. So just to kind of share. So everything I shared, really easy on paper, really hard to do. Really hard to do. And there's many reasons for that, right? We are creatures of habit. You go back to the thinking fast, like the system 1, like so much of our daily lives is oriented around, this is how I do it. This is how I know to do it. This is a situation. This is a pattern I see. This is how I respond to it now because I've responded to it this way in the past, right? And because of the neural networks in our brain, like we do something, and the habit, that the practice becomes habit. So some things that we can do, aside from the actual tools I shared, is trying to create some space for like our slow thinking. And so the slow thinking is really like being reflective of, okay, what are my reactions, or what have my reactions been in recent volatility, right? And I'll give you an example. My immediate reaction to volatility is I want to do more. Like me personally, Santi. That's not always the most effective approach, because then I'm, end up doing things that, probably weren't top of mind, but I just feel productive having gotten things done, right? As opposed to maybe taking even 15 to 20 minutes, just kind of slowing down and thinking about what have been my habits in response to VUCA in the past. Then the other piece here is that once we know what we've done in the past, and we can start to design and think for ourselves of what we want for the future, because our brains are so adaptive, because the neural networks are so adaptive, and the plasticity is so strong, like we can develop new practices. And a big piece here is like when you are feeling discomfort, when you're trying something new, maybe you're trying a new meditative practice, maybe you're trying a new exercise routine, maybe you're trying the Pomodoro technique, and minute 16, 17, you start to feel antsy. Like that is all a clear sign that you are building new pathways, new neural networks. That discomfort is actually a sign of growth. And the more we do this, the more we repeat it, the better positioned you are to actually create the new habit. You start to talk about it differently, you start to think about it differently, and then it becomes familiar to the point that the old way of doing things is the way that it feels uncomfortable. I don't expect you to adopt all 10 of these tools, but my encouragement for you would be to like find one on the individual side and one on the team side, and in the next month work on implementing that into your routine. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll just ask the questions in general to the group, so as not to share the screen, but we can all see each other a little bit more. So I'm curious if any of these resonate with you, or if there's a specific technique you think would help in whatever challenges you might be facing currently. And somebody other than Kathy or Daniel, I appreciate.
I could think on the individual realm, something like you can go for a walk, yeah. So or you're revitalized by, or you can do the meditations, the mindfulness exercises, all that. And I think for the team, just a simple check-in on where people feel and to give them the opportunity to ventilate, I think is also very appropriate. Yeah.
Right. And making it a practice, like folks know, like if maybe you do the check-in you ask the staff every day at 10 a.m. on the shared chat, right? Like it becomes a ritual, it becomes a routine, it becomes something folks can expect on, because that's so much more powerful than maybe doing it on one week Tuesday at 10, the next week Wednesday at 4, right? Like that's not the consistency we're trying to create as leaders. We're trying to create something stable. But Frank, that's wonderful. Yes, thank you.
I'd add that shared language and shared framework is such a great building block, that makes um, the goal to do something well together so much easier than just wanting to do something well together. You start with this right kind of framework, as you're pointing out, and everybody's kind of coming in with the same language.
Yes, absolutely. Shared language is one of the scarcest resources in organizations, right? It shifts the expectations significantly. Yeah.
I think something that really resonates with me, Santi, maybe it's just because there is so much volatility around us these days. It's just the pausing, and I think you just called it slow thinking, or in coaching, powerful questions, right? Anything that sort of takes us out of ourselves and can help us observe what's happening, observe our own habits, or observe a team's propensity, anything that sort of interrupts, like the busyness, right? The propensity that you said that you had to work harder, right? I think that's called for right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. If anyone's read, Sonia, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Mary Ellen, let me share this and then jump to you. If anyone's read Leadership on the Line, one of the frameworks in that book is this idea of being on the dance floor versus the balcony. If you remember, like when dance halls had like the mezzanine and the balcony, and you could actually look down and see who is dancing well, who dances alone, who's a wallflower, who's in groups, versus being on the dance floor. That's so you go. Your perspective is very immediate. You might be a very good dancer, you might be very concentrated, but you're very focused in this space. And so we look at it also from we tie that to Daniel Kahneman's fast and slow thinking. The dance floor is the fast thinking. The slow thinking is when you're on the balcony, you've got the perspective. And the slow thinking requires a lot of effort, so much so that it actually burns calories. And so like, you go to a retreat and you're, the strategic planning meeting, you've been in the meeting for all day, you're exhausted at the end of the day, even though you've just been seated. That's because you've been doing a lot of slow thinking, and it's really hard to get off the dance floor, because also a lot of us really like being on the dance floor. Mary Ellen, yeah, you're gonna add.
Excuse me. Last term, I was asked to analyze a program on the campus by one of the areas in the College of Graduate and Continuing Studies. And one of my observations in doing the project was to note the amount, or to note the culture, because I had to ask questions of stakeholders around the campus. And many of them offered information, and then many of them also demonstrated a huge amount of resistance in asking these questions, and they didn't want to answer. And I became very curious to understand what it was that was causing this. What was the acceptance or expectation level? And I know we always talk about the implementation of these practices, as you're noting with us, but I also am intensely curious about changing those kinds of environments and the dynamic and mindset, because I find university and college campuses are often not trained in leadership or management. They are academics, and they, as academics, are scholars in their particular area, but they don't know how to create change or to analyze their own cultures.
Right. Well, and so yes, I appreciate you sharing that, Mary Ellen. The and part of it is the unseen, right? I've mentioned like the emergence piece of the framework, right? Like the culture, part of it feels unseen, part of it is very intentional, right? Part of it is how we design policies and the values we orient towards, and the rituals we have as a group. And it also speaks to the psychological safety that gets created in the group, which, Mary Ellen, to your point of like, folks not maybe feeling comfortable or interested in answering the questions might be part of that, and or the value proposition. What does it matter, right? Daniel, I see your note here. Yes. I'll pass it to you, Daniel, and Kathy. But thank you all.
So
Take us home, Kathy.
Santi, you'll send me the slide deck, and then I will send out an email to everybody on the call, and also invite you to sign up for one of our months to think about either something that you would like to share, or perhaps somebody that you know that you think would be fun to bring in and share some interesting ideas that they're doing. So look for my email. And Santi, these were great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I still want to come back and ask you at some point in the future to talk about this. What did you call it? Backwards forecasting. That is another thing that you're experimenting with.
Yeah.
So I think that could be fun.
Yeah, the
as
future
well.
backwards exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, future backwards. And then I
Yes.
wanted to hook up to something that Christine put into the chat room, which is some of this stuff is getting scarcer with AI. And there is, you can tell when something is generated with AI, as we have a number of people who write in this group. And like I'm thinking about you, Frank, in particular, but Christine as well. And you can tell when there's a human behind it and when there isn't. And much of what Santi shared today was things that is really what we might call human technology in groups and organizations. In other words, it has to have a human spirit, a living spirit, and a soul behind these practices to actually gain the benefit. And so
I meant more that as AI uniquely caters to us, that our vocabulary is it's like normalizing, and it's becoming when we talk about a common vocabulary, like we're not getting the friction of creativity that we need. We're getting constant agreement with AI.
Right.
We're getting this kind of benign neglect with our AI that we're not bringing the friction of disagreement to it because we may not know enough to challenge it. Or we may be getting complacent, or we may be getting lazy, or we may be getting, we may end up relying on it like a crutch. Like that's what I'm writing about in my newsletter. And it's keeping us where we're at unless we are dogged about arguing with it and challenging it and wrestling it. And only we with as autonomous agents of evolution will spark our own growth. And there's so few people, like as human beings, we're just not that, like, we don't like our cheese moved that much. We don't like to be prodded. And so when we get this AI machine talking to us, like, that's a wonderful idea. And what a great idea that is. Like, we're like, oh, well, okay, well, yeah. And so we're less likely to push back on it. And when I teach it, I'm like, you argue with every single output that you get from that thing. Like, I don't care how polished and good it looks. Like, you push back on every single thing. Like, what if Ronald Reagan gave it to you? What if Betsy Ross gave it to you? What if I give it from 5 different people's perspective and see what it gives you? Because it doesn't, it's dumb. It is a dumb machine. It's super smart, but like, you are the one that pushes it forward. So I think what you said was really important, that we are lacking this common vocabulary, and it is accelerated because of this tool that we're very quickly becoming dependent and complacent with.
Lovely.
Makes sense?
What a great ending to this great call. So Santi,
Sorry.
thank you so much for sharing. And Christine, it sounds like you got another, I would call it a fervorino, something that you're quite passionate about. And speak with fervor on as another language to the low stake or low stake, high, whatever that you shared and introduced to us. Hot take. Anyway, we will reconvene next month on May 20th with Marty and Consciousness. And I will send you an email with the slide deck and also an invitation to sign up for one of our months to either share something that you've been thinking about, or share, identify somebody to come in and stimulate, provoke our thinking. Thank you so much for being here. It was great to see all of you.
Thank you.
And you all have the emails in the chat.
Thank you, Santi.
So
Have a wonderful day.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Don't forget to cancel recording. There you go.
thank you.